Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to another episode of Psychology of Dr. V. Today we'll be discussing the very important topic of bipolar disorder and depression. Without further ado, I will introduce our guest, who has accepted to shine a light on her condition and how it affects her life.
Hello, and so it's a pleasure to have you here with us today.
Thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be here.
So I'm just going to jump right into it. So when were you officially diagnosed, and what was the diagnosis?
I was diagnosed 3 years ago with depression and bipolar disorder.
Do you know what type of depression you have?
Yes, I have bipolar depression, which can also be called bipolar disorder or manic depression.
Mm-hmm. So did you notice any changes in your behavior or relationships before your diagnosis?
Before my diagnosis, I noticed that I started having phases where I would isolate myself from friends and family, and I would blatantly ignore them. I would push them away and reject their comfort and support, although I was very grateful for it, but I couldn't help it. It wasn't intentional. I couldn't control my behaviors, and my energy was just extremely drained. Other times, I would have phases where I would get irritable and angry irrationally, and there were other times where I felt bold, agitated, loud, and hyper.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes these episodes were mixed together. My relationships with others started to strain, especially during episodes where I would ignore others. I could see that my symptoms took a huge toll on my friends and family, too, and it created a lot of guilt in me, which resulted in me further suppressing my desire to heal and create more feelings of isolation.
What was your initial reaction towards your diagnosis, and how did you deal with it? Like, was it a feeling of relief, or...
Well, my diagnosis was actually a huge relief. I felt liberated, as if a weight was lifted off my shoulders. I felt like my suffering had been validated, and I felt like it motivated me to get better.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, I wasn't happy that I had a mental illness, but at least it was confirmed that all I've been going through these days, all these years for such a long time, it was real, you know?
Yeah. So, did you hide your diagnosis from anyone? And if so, how did you let them know?
I didn't hide my diagnosis. However, I did hide the fact that I had been dealing with heavier symptoms, such as suicidal thoughts, self-mutilation, and feelings of guilt and despair from my friends and family. I let my friends know about these symptoms beforehand, but I felt less of a risk of judgment from them by sharing my thoughts and feelings with them and venting. But I let my family know afterwards in a less detailed way.
Yeah.
Not mentioning the heavy symptoms, obviously, like the suicidal thoughts. I mean, I don't think anybody's family would want to hear that.
Of course. So how did your friends and family react to your diagnosis?
Well, they reacted well since they knew about what I was going through beforehand. They were actually extremely supportive, and I'm very happy for that. Yeah.
So, how are your relationships since your diagnosis?
Alright, well, they've been better thanks to therapy, medication, and self-care. While the symptoms are still present due to habits, it's only been a year since my diagnosis, and my relationships have overall improved, I'd say.
Yeah. So, what symptoms did you experience regarding depression and bipolar disorder? And how long do your episodes last?
Well, since bipolar disorder can also be called bipolar depression, my symptoms of depression and bipolar disorder generally go hand in hand.
Mm-hmm.
So I have symptoms like migraines, feelings of guilt and despair, self-loathing, suicidal thoughts, self-mutilation, mood swings. I also have manic episodes, which includes very high energy, impulsivity, lack of hunger, being loud, agitated. I also have depressive episodes, which could be like isolation, suicidal thoughts, having too much or too little sleep, social withdrawal, feeling of worthlessness and emptiness, lack of energy, lack of interest in things that I used to enjoy.
Yeah.
Yeah. And my my depressive episode lasts longer than my manic episodes. My manic episodes last about 4 days to a week, but my depressive episodes last from a week to a month, I'd say.
So, do you still have any symptoms? And if so, did they reduce over time?
Yes, I still have all of these symptoms except for the self-mutilation. And yes, I would say that they're much less recurrent than they were before.
And what would you say is the hardest part of living with depression and bipolar disorder?
Um, the hardest part is seeing how it affects my loved ones, including my family and my friends. Losing people because of something you can't control really sucks, you know? It feels terrible. The second hardest part, I would say, are the depressive symptoms, so especially feeling guilty, helpless, and suicidal.
And on the contrary, what do you think would be the best part of living with your conditions?
The best part would be being able to grow and gain wisdom from my experiences. For example, it's easy for me to relate and comfort someone else because of what I've been through. It's also very easier, it's a lot easier to empathize and know exactly how they feel. So I get to learn a lot about myself and how I react to certain events and people.
And with all the judgment and preconceived notions that teenagers could have, how did you find living with your condition as a teenager to be?
Um, it depends. Teenagers are so diverse these days, so there are some times where I felt accepted and comforted that I wasn't suffering alone. Plus, teenagers can be extremely relatable and understanding. So even if they don't have a mental illness necessarily, they could still understand you and listen to you and sympathize with you. However, there were other times where I felt judged for acting the way I do because of who I am, and I couldn't control any of it. And so, of course, I felt guilty and reclusive because of that. I also saw that the way that some people reacted to mentally ill people, the way that they use language to demonize mental illness, I'd say it was a mix of both emotions. Really.
So if I may ask, how was your childhood?
My childhood wasn't bad actually. I was raised in a very healthy family, and my parents loved me and took care of me. They made sure that I did my homework, although they weren't very implicated in my academic life. But they still made sure that I did all my homework on time, that I did all my projects, that I had good friends. And of course, like, I understood that they weren't as implicated as other parents were, and that's because they're extremely busy people. They're immigrants, so they have to sponsor other families to come and live here. However, I did feel emotionally and physically neglected. I usually depended on TV and games for entertainment. I also always felt excluded. And I was a very shy and sensitive kid. And I was always looking for validation from other people. I always felt like I was liked less and that I had to make more of an effort to fit in with my friends and relate to them. And I felt this way because, for example, I would get tag teamed against a lot. And I was also a somewhat submissive and quiet child.
Oh.
Yeah.
So did you experience any traumatic events during childhood?
Well, in kindergarten, I was bullied for being Asian. Also, some of my family members would tease me, and I didn't necessarily know what teasing was at the time. So I took it extremely personally, and I would become very insecure. I was a really goody two-shoe type of a child, so every time I would get yelled at, I would feel extremely guilty.
Do you think there might have been any events that might have triggered your mental illnesses?
I'd say either seasonal depression in 7th grade or puberty, or this one time I got yelled at by my teacher, and I never was really the type of kid to get yelled at when I was young, so I felt extremely guilty, and I remember I cried myself to sleep that night, and I internalized all of that guilt that I felt, and I just started hating myself for it, and I felt worthless.
Is there a history of mental illness in your family?
No, at least no one that's officially diagnosed.
Do you feel the need to help others deal with their illnesses, their mental illnesses, since you're a survivor yourself?
Oh, definitely. Even though I'm not qualified to be a therapist, I do think that a little show of support goes a long way. Whenever anyone talks to me or checks up on me, I feel so grateful. And whenever I vent to my best friends and spend time with them, I feel so much better. I feel like so much weight has been lifted off my shoulders. Also, of course, the mental illness will still always be there. The symptoms won't disappear. And so that's why I find it's important to help others learn to deal with and live with their mental illnesses.
Mm-hmm.
However, it's also very important that I don't expect a positive response all the time.
Of course.
It's important to give people the time and space to heal and grow. And sometimes being bombarded with help from other people can be extremely overwhelming. Also, it's a matter of timing and circumstance. Sometimes trying to help others and failing can be very toxic for yourself. I've learned that the hard way, trust me. So unfortunately, it's very complex. Overall, it's important to always have a good heart and to deliver your intentions carefully and unconditionally, which means to not expect anything in return, including a positive response.
Absolutely. And so, do you believe in the quote, "We're all a little broken"? And if so, why?
Well, broken in this context can be interpreted in so many different ways. My interpretation of this quote is that everybody is a little sad, a little confused, a little existential, and all of these feelings coming from life experiences. I don't interpret broken in a heavy, mentally distraught type of way, but I understand that there are others who do interpret it that way, and I do not agree with that at all. I feel like this quote seems to romanticize pain and suffering a little bit. Nevertheless, it does allow people to realize that they're not alone in this. There's other people suffering. There's other people who experience pain, which is what I really like about this quote.
So for this next question, I would just ask that you answer it directly to our viewers.
Okay.
So, what would be the best advice that you could give to someone who just found out that they have either bipolar disorder and or depression?
Alright, well, no matter how cliche this may sound, it's gonna be okay. Things can and will get better. Of course, they'll get worse eventually, but that's reality, and I could promise you that they will get better after that. It's life. Please don't ever even think about committing suicide. Don't kill yourself. Life is too short and precious to take your own. You matter to someone and you've made a difference in someone's life. I can guarantee that. The world is better with you in it, and you have all the time and space in the world to create yourself and create relationships with others.
Well, thank you for that. It was very appreciated, and thank you for agreeing to come here today.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me. Thank you so much.
Thank you, dear viewers, for tuning in, and I hope you appreciated our very touching and sentimental interview with our special guest. Tune in next week to discuss the effects of schizophrenia on someone's life.